In today's video, I'll show you how to make a quick sourdough naan with goat cheese and hot peppers. Naan is a Southeastern Asian flatbread that's traditionally baked on a very hot tandoor oven. Last month, I got to go to the World Naan Festival, where I got to learn more about naan, see hundreds of naans being made, and even taste test 6 or 7 different varieties of naan. This goat cheese and hot pepper version was an absolute crowd favorite, and today I want to show you how you can make it at home. Here are the ingredients you'll need for this quick unfermented naan: water, plain yogurt or plain Greek yogurt, sourdough starter or discard, and a neutral oil. For the dry ingredients, you'll need all-purpose flour, baking powder, salt, and white sugar. And since this is a filled or stuffed naan, you'll need 1 jalapeno, 4 ounces of plain goat cheese, and then some melted butter to brush on top of the bread after you're done. Start by adding 70 grams of water to a mixing bowl. After the water, add 4 tablespoons or 65 grams of plain Greek yogurt or plain regular yogurt. Then add 100 grams of sourdough starter. This can be active sourdough starter that has doubled in size, or leftover sourdough starter discard. It doesn't matter for this recipe. After the starter, add 10 grams or about 1 tablespoon of neutral vegetable oil. Then stir the ingredients together with a fork or a whisk. You'll want to whisk the ingredients fairly thoroughly so that there aren't any chunks of starter present in the liquid ingredients. You want it to be as smooth as possible by the time you add the dry ingredients to this mix. The liquid ingredients should become smooth and start to thicken up a little bit after about 30 to 60 seconds of whisking. Now put your mixing bowl back on top of your digital scale and add 200 grams of all-purpose flour. Follow that with 6 grams or 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder. Some quick naan recipes do call for baking soda instead of baking powder, but I liked the results better when I used baking powder. Then add 6 grams or 1 teaspoon of kosher salt and 2 grams or a half teaspoon of white sugar. Then stir the dry and wet ingredients together as much as you can for about a minute until it becomes a shaggy dough that looks something like this. Then turn the dough out onto your kitchen counter and don't put any flour down on the counter. There's plenty of flour in the dough already, and adding more during the kneading process could make you end up with a drier and denser naan. So knead this dough by hand on an unfloured counter for 3 to 5 minutes until your dough ends up looking something like this. It should hold together nicely with no clumps or dry bits, but it doesn't need to be fully developed. It doesn't need to be completely smooth. A bumpy looking top on the top of the dough is okay for this recipe. Cover the dough up now with a mixing bowl and let it rest for 10 minutes on the counter. During the 10-minute rest, prepare your goat cheese and hot peppers. For that, you'll need 4 ounces of plain goat cheese. This is the brand I'm using, but I'm not particular. And then you'll just need 1 medium jalapeno. If you want to use a spicier pepper, go for it. And if you want to use a sweet bell pepper, that's fine too. Use whatever you like. But the naan I'm basing this recipe on definitely used a spicy pepper. To prepare the jalapeno, cut off the end and then remove the seeds with a spoon. The heat is not contained in the seeds, but you don't want the seeds ending up inside of this bread. That just creates a bad texture, and that's why you want to remove them. After you remove the seeds, slice the jalapeno into thin strips, and then finely dice the jalapeno. When I was recipe testing this, I used a coarser chop for the jalapeno at first, but the big pieces of pepper would tear the naan as I was rolling them flat, and the small, finely diced jalapenos seem to give the best texture and flavor throughout the bread. So keep dicing until your hot pepper looks something like this. Now for the goat cheese, take your 4 ounces of soft goat cheese and place it next to the jalapenos, and using a bench scraper or chef's knife, divide the 4 ounces of goat cheese into 6 equally sized pieces. The dough will yield 6 pieces of naan, so you'll need 6 pieces of cheese divided equally among the 6 pieces of dough. After the dough has rested for 10 minutes, uncover it and divide it into 6 equal pieces with a bench scraper or a chef's knife. These equal pieces should roughly weigh 76 grams each if you're weighing them out, but I just divide them by hand. Flatten each piece of dough out a little bit with your hand just so you're able to place the cheese and peppers on top of a flat piece of dough. It's much easier than doing it onto a ball of dough. With your flat pieces of dough pressed down, add 1 piece of goat cheese to the center of each ball and press it down with your fingertips. Then add about 1 teaspoon's worth of diced jalapenos into the center of each piece of dough right on top of the goat cheese. And if you have just a little bit of diced jalapenos left over, you can distribute those throughout the doughs as you see fit. To shape these sourdough naans, we're going to be balling them up with the fillings inside and then flattening them with a rolling pin later. So grab an edge of the dough and stretch it up in the air and put it under your thumb. Bring each edge of the dough under your thumb and they should all meet in the middle. Then all of the fillings are nicely housed inside the ball of dough like this. Shape all 6 of the balls of dough and let them rest for 10 minutes on the counter. A few minutes before you're ready to cook the naans, heat up a cast iron skillet on medium-low heat. When the air a few inches above the pan feels warm, you're ready to cook. After 10 minutes of rest, flatten the dough ball just a little bit with your fingertips before rolling it. Then get out a rolling pin and roll the naan a few times forward and backward until it's roughly 1/4 of an inch thick. Then give the naan a quarter turn and roll it forward and backward again until you reach 1/8 of an inch thick. As an untrained home baker who admittedly doesn't have a lot of experience making naans, I find that 1/8 of an inch is the perfect thickness for this bread. If I roll them much thicker than this, I find that they don't bubble or brown up in the way that I want them to. So roll your naans into a circle or an oval shape. This should distribute the goat cheese and hot peppers throughout the dough, and now they're ready to cook. Lay the naans onto a hot cast iron pan without any oil. This is not a fried dough, but it's cooked against a hot surface. And while this is a poor substitute for a real tandoor oven, I don't have one of those, and this is how I cook them at home. Cook the naan on medium-low heat for 1.5 to 2 minutes on the first side. Then check under the edges to make sure the naan isn't sticking and to see how much it's browning. When you see a lot of brown spots, but not too many black spots, at around the 1.5 to 2 minute mark, flip the naan over and cook it for another minute on the other side. After a minute cooking on the other side, flip it over to check and it should be perfectly cooked. Move the naan to a wire rack to rest while you cook the other naans. A few black marks is good, but if you notice your naans are getting too blackened on one side, turn your heat down from medium-low to low for a little while just to let it cool off for a little bit, and then you could turn it back to medium-low if it's not cooking hot enough. You might have to toggle back and forth between medium-low and low, based on my experience. Once your naans are cooked but still warm, brush some melted butter or ghee on top of the warm bread. I melted about a tablespoon of butter in the microwave and I added it to the naans with a pastry brush. While you can heat these naans up later in the oven if they happen to cool down, I find that they're best enjoyed as fresh as possible after you cook them, once they've had maybe 30 seconds to a minute to cool down. These naans are soft and buttery, but still a little bit crispy if there's some thinner spots. They're almost smoky on those char marks from the high heat cooking, and the spiciness of the jalapeños is beautifully mellowed out by the cool and creamy goat cheese. It's no wonder this flavor combination was a crowd favorite at the World Naan Festival. If you want to make this recipe at home, check out the link in the description below, and I'll see you in the next video.
You can make it any shape you want. You can make it pointy, you can make it round, you can make it fat, you can make it crunchy, you can make it soft, skinny, whatever. So some different variations.